Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the modern market, where every day we discuss all things to do with the modern market. That is the crypto market, the NFT market, and how to make some or a lot of money on the internet. We hope loaded up for discussion today. We've got the US Senate narrowly passing Trump's big, beautiful bill. We'll discuss how big or how beautiful it is, and some of the consequences. Solana trading app Axiom's briefly overtaken Hyperliquid on daily volume with more than $1.7 million in fees. We'll be discussing revenue again, and value accrual. Brad will be taking that section in a bit. And then we've got Figma IPO documents revealing $70 million of Bitcoin, one of the first major companies to reveal Bitcoin on its balance sheet. We'll talk some of the significance of that. We're also delighted to say we've got Enzo, co-founder of GTE, coming on the show a little bit later. Cannot wait to have that conversation in just a little bit. And of course, we'll be talking where the capital and attention is flowing in our opinions. I've got Legendary and Brett in the co-host seats with me today. We are ready to get into it, but just a reminder, friends, before we do, nothing that we say here is financial advice. The market is incredibly risky. We do not know anything for sure, so please proceed with caution and exercise your own judgment. With that out of the way, Legendary, it is Wednesday. It is the 2nd of July. How are you doing? How are you feeling?
GM, doing quite well. Seems like I didn't miss anything yesterday. Looking at the prices, ETH is still a 2.4 to 2.5K asset. A lot of things are happening, but it doesn't really reflect on the ETH price at least. But I think today is going to be a really interesting show with all the discussion around the big, beautiful bill, as well as the dial-in. So it's going to be probably the highlight of the week for me when it comes to the shows.
We called it. We called it with all the Robinhood stuff. Like, oh yeah, like everything's start pumping. And then we're like, we know we're gonna log on, and the price is gonna be right back to 2,400, 2,500. And
so that's on Monday at the end of the show. I said I'm gonna miss Tuesday, and he's gonna report that ETH is still at 2.4K.
Yeah. Yesterday, my question to Stats on the show was, "Oh, you like stablecoins? How do you like ETH?"
If you like stablecoins, you're gonna love ETH.
Yeah. If you like that USDC, let me introduce you to Ethereum. One thing you did miss, Legendary. Sorry, go on. Oh wow, what's this?
We're interviewing Legendary's Mike today.
Oh, there you go.
Hey, buddy. Oh, AI goes rogue. See, you probably talked some shit on your camera at one point, and now he's like, I ain't gonna have any of this. He's like, I'm gonna wait for you to go live, and then I'm just gonna for people who can't see this on this like Spaces or whatever. This is pretty incredible, camera, and it's just like mega zooming in on his mic, so it's just like fucking around with him.
Legendary's blushing right now because the AI's taken a liking to his floral polo shirt.
Yeah. I mean, I don't blame it.
You think that's what's happening, Ledge? You did say you're going to start wearing some more outlandish clothing on the show now.
Yeah, I am. And it seems the AI is completely overwhelmed with this like floral and horsey silk combination on a shirt. But I turned the AI feature off because this was unbearable.
Okay, so the AI is noticing. The AI is noticing. The AI is advancing. That is good. Okay.
So, I missed the show a little bit yesterday, obviously. L2, Robinhood stuff, like that's the game. Oh fuck, see now I turn on my AI. I gotta be careful. Be careful. I gotta watch out with my hand signals. I'm Italian, so I'm talking, I use my hands a lot, and it trips up the AI shit. Yeah, so like what was your takeaway with all that stuff? Like obviously I was fighting on the timeline a little bit with it. We didn't talk on the show. I mean, what were you guys' thoughts? Like market's given all of it back, except for Hood. I bought Hood on Friday. Awesome. Can we talk about how forecasted that was? Like, it is meme coin season of the stock market. Like we knew this shit was coming. We were sitting on it. We kind of we had a week to prep. And what's Hood at right now?
93. But it went to 100 basically.
Nice. And I think it was 88 on Friday, 80-ish. Yeah. So like, bro, you could have bought some options. You could have eventually, maybe we'll be able to get some perps going on TradFi rails. That would have been sick.
You had all the time in the world. I bought it like literally on Monday after the show and sold, and it was like up 8-9%. And now it's down a bit, and now I bought in again.
Game is game.
I just do think it's confirmation of some of the stuff we've been talking about on the show. This was my tweet from June the 21st, 2025. So I don't know, a couple weeks ago. Circle was bundled up and bonded, fast, low, float, high FDV. If you were in memes, pivot to IPOs. Like, I just think, okay, this was not an IPO in that sense, right? But it is the stock market. And we've been talking about on the show routinely that like a lot of the hot activity is moving to stocks. We spoke yesterday also, in addition to Robinhood, it's clearly like been the strongest gainer out of all of that, right? I think Arbitrum was up 30%, and that gave it all away. Obviously, Robinhood chain being attached to Arbitrum. But there was another stock where Tom Lee, this kind of significant investor, has become chairman of, in order to make it the MicroStrategy of ETH, and that was announced in the morning. And the price started to go up, and it just continued to go up for quite a long time into the day. I think at the end of the day, it was 6 or 7x. And the interesting thing was, when we did this analysis on the show yesterday, we're like, you know how when a meme coin comes out and everyone goes in hot, like it immediately dips down, right? Like it gives up the gains like pretty quickly. If you're late, it's not great, especially if a prominent Twitter account tweets it, for example. This news came out in the morning from like prominent mainstream media, and the chart just went up like all day. And so what that's telling me is that there's a lot of opportunity at the moment for when you hear these things in the news. The rest of the world doesn't operate on the speed that we operate, I don't think. And certainly not when it comes to these smaller stocks, or which people are still trying to figure out where the value sits. So I think two things. One, I think the stock market is the thing where the value is starting to accrue most to. And look, there's obviously going to be exceptions, right? Still like super bullish on Hyperliquid, for example. But then second, even like on the fast moving stuff, I think that's where you'll want to catch something in a way that you might have previously been waiting for something to bond and then catch it on the run up. So those are some of my thoughts, Brad, but curious for your takeaway, maybe more on the technical side or even on the price side.
Yeah, no, I like it. I like it as far as a play goes, or like where I want to put some of my attention. I think we're onto it. So like, it's just a matter of like making sure we're positioned to take action on it. I know like I haven't dusted off a lot of my TradFi rails in a while. I've been mostly in the positions I've been in for a year, 2 years. Like, and it's mostly all just like Coinbase. I just playing long game Coinbase. I did sell off. It was a Bitcoin miner for Hood last week, just so I needed some exposure for the same reason that I needed exposure into hype. Remember, I was just like, I need to like kill myself. I need to do something to like release valve, make sure I get something on this so that I don't make stupid decisions. So I did that. I did that with Hood last week, and now I just need to evaluate everything else that I have and say, okay, am I in position for if an IPO comes? Am I in position for if a catalyst is on the horizon and I want to buy into Hood, Circle, Coinbase, whatever thing we see is like signaling some crypto integration or crypto innovation, and we think they're going to have a news burst on it. So I need to refine my setup a little bit. I did set up also like a Robinhood account, like, you know, some of that just because I want to like see how the app actually feels and like how quickly they're integrating stuff. And I see like, bro, they got prediction markets over there from Kalshi. They got, you know, now they're going to do perps, which is like a fucking 5-click, 3 times leverage perp you can get into place. Like they're gonna, yeah, they got a slick UX. Like, and if the you know, the kids aren't gonna have a chance, frankly, with all these financial tools that they're gonna have.
Yeah, I think the UX will be excellent. They kind of previewed it, but I guess one of the key differentiators is 3x leverage is not going to compare with the greater leverage that you can get access to, whether it's on Hyperliquid or elsewhere, right? When you're kind of
But
trading.
people aren't going to know that, right? That's like,
Sure.
the Wall Street bets. People are just going to be like, wait, you mean I don't have to pick a date? I can just like say long? Hell yeah, bro. And then like, that's enough, right?
Yeah. I think that's correct. That's certainly correct. Ledge, curious for your thoughts here, because we're probably not going to circle back to this today, but I know you saw the news yesterday and it was big news. So what was your take?
Yeah, very much to what Brett said. I think this could change this entire dynamic. Like if you spend a good amount of time on Reddit Wall Street Bets and you see how the community is there, is trying to pump something or is like degening into something, but it's more difficult to, let's say, coordinate that if you have an expiration date to worry about. And if you, as Brad said, you can just go perpetually long with whatever amount of leverage you want to do that. That changes this whole like retail ganging up,
Yeah,
pumping
bro.
weird stock dynamics, and turns it into a more mimetic version of it.
Well, you get to wipe out all the Greeks. Like that was always like I played options, and even with playing the options, like you get like the alpha, beta, zeta, gata, jeta, beta, gamma, hamma, famma stuff that you have to pay attention to for like, oh, well, you got theta decay on the thing after a 6-month period, but don't worry about it because we're gonna gamma squeeze. And then like people don't do or want to do that shit. You have like a small percentage that is even aware of those things, and the rest of them are just like, LOL, bro, 0 day, 5 weeks out. Or 0 day, and then like maybe I'll take something for Friday, like, and that's all they want to deal with. So to be able to abstract all of that stuff and just say, bro, we're going long.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hell yeah.
We like
Hell
that.
yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. I think like exactly that, like understanding something like theta, the rate of time decay and stuff like that, and
Theta's
also
time decay, gammas with whatever. Yeah.
Vega, and all those, I said, all those cases,
Yeah.
like I feel like this is a massive barrier to option trading for many, many people.
Yeah, this is gonna be
I
good.
studied that shit and it still doesn't feel intuitive to me.
Yeah.
Completely agree. Okay, so it looks like the value is accruing to Hood. We're talking a lot about Hood versus Coin. I think that's probably a conversation we'll circle back to another day. But I mean, you can see it in the market, right? Hood maintaining some of the value, everything else kind of selling off. Brad, did you want to say a final thing on this, and then we'll get into the price action?
Yeah. One final thing is just like the construction that they chose. So the L2 is better. It's better for Ethereum than the L3. I will say that.
Why is that?
Just because the closer you are to mainnet, the more likely you are to have Ethereum as money, and that's like basically
So
all
what's
of
the
the value
construction?
prop of L2s.
Just for people who are still trying to wrap their head around it.
It's basically, so it is, Robinhood is to Arbitrum as Base is to Optimism. So
Okay.
Robinhood will be its own dedicated chain whenever it launches. It will settle directly to Ethereum mainnet. It will have the same technological stack as all the other Arbitrum chains. It's an orbit, right? It's got that. So it can interoperate more easily with all the other Arbitrum chains. And for Arbitrum, if you care about this kind of stuff, just like when Base gives some of its revenues to Optimism and the OP Collective, Robinhood chain will give 10% of its on-chain revenues to Arbitrum, to the Arbitrum DAO, which is, neutral for Arbitrum, the token. That means Arbitrum, the token, has governance over all the money that it accrues, whether it's in Ethereum or USDC or whatever. So like it's better for Ethereum because you're not, if they were to settle to Arbitrum, the chain, the likelihood is it's 100% abstracted. It's all USDC stuff. And like, if they do anything, maybe it's probably like around ARB, the token. And then that's like basically zero value gain for Ethereum. Like, why the fuck would you wouldn't care? Whereas now, because it's kind of like a base construction, you would expect Ethereum to be the gas token and probably the money on the chain. And with that, you're going to get a little bit of moneyness as a value prop of Ethereum. People are going to use it to degen, to do whatever on the chain, depending on how much they abstract it. So like directionally more bullish Ethereum with what they chose.
Okay. That's
Still not like, man.
Okay. Still not sure on the value accrued to Ethereum, ETH, the token, perhaps. But interesting to get that breakdown. I think that was really, really helpful. One final thought, since we're on the topic. I put out a tweet a couple of days ago saying that I actually think some of this is bearish for certain tokens, not all tokens, because I think there will be like an amount of demand that goes towards, because I think TradFi or traditional trading and crypto trading is just like kind of merging and kind of blurring. And what that means is that there will just be more assets that are competing for people's attention. And I think there's a lot of bad assets that are still got like huge valuations within crypto. And there are fewer bad assets that are going to get people's attention on the stock market. And if the stock market can continue to evidence 6x gains in a day, like it did yesterday with BMNR, this company that was going to do, MicroStrategy for ETH play, people don't care. And I think one thing that people are under indexing personally is people think, oh, degens won't do it. They just want to stay on chain. No, degens want a 6x. That's what they want. If on chain's not delivering that to them, then they will open the Robinhood account and do whatever they need to do there. It's no different to when people on ETH finally succumbs to moving over to Solana. Okay, fine, I'll open a Photon account and I'll use this trading bot in order to try to do it. Like as an individual, resisted for a long time. I didn't want to do it. It's not where I was comfortable. But then the gains pull you over in the end. So that's my thought there. And I'd just be curious from your guys' perspectives, because I think, well, there's two things happening. One, there's like this on-chain opportunity to trade. So you've got StockX, not StockX, X, what's the name? X stocks backed by BackedFi.
Yeah.
Legendary, you'll remember the name. Basically, this opportunity to trade stocks directly on Solana. People were kind of saying yesterday, okay, well, realistically, it didn't do much volume. The volume was not very impressive. I think that's kind of neither here nor there. I think the main thing will be just new and alternative assets coming in, like private stock, which I do think will catch a bid personally, will catch a proportion of the bid. It might not take all of it by any means. And this is not saying on-chain activity is going to go away either, but I'm just saying there's going to be more stuff and the lines are going to get blurred, which means that I think there's more competition, the best stuff wins, and some of the other nonsense just is going to get filtered out. But curious for your thoughts on the kind of introduction of stocks as well, Legendary first, and then maybe Bread, and then maybe we'll get into today's headlines, which we're going to have to go through fast.
We were short today too.
Yeah. Look, I'm gonna keep it short because I feel like you put that perfectly on a show last week where you said like that ultimately what bringing stocks on chain means that is increasing the competitiveness for everything else that is on chain, for all the other tokens, alts, memes, whatever that is. And it's that some stocks, whether there's like publicly or probably even more so with private companies like SpaceX, can be even more mimetic because they don't have a value that is as transparently pegged as something that's traded publicly on the stock market. And if you're between trading meme X or just pumping the shit out of a private company that you can trade on chain as well, I do feel that this is going to add a lot of competitiveness and a lot of money and interest will flow into that and probably will trade very, very meme-like for certain stocks or shares.
I'm curious how, what these on-chain stocks are going to kind of be like, kind of like futures, because you buy the thing and the thing is just a ticket or receipt, and you can redeem it for the off-chain price, regardless of what the gap is. So if like liquidity is low and people are buying a shit ton of the stocks on chain, say there's a gap of 10% on chain, you can still only redeem it for the actual off-chain price, right? You're not going to pull that off-chain price to the on-chain price, unless there's enough volume that people see it as like a signal for like, oh, there's demand here, and then they start bidding it. They start bidding it off-chain, right? So it's almost like a pre-market situation where you're going to look at it, you're like, oh, this is the price of the thing. Oh, it's it's up 10% and on crypto markets, and I would expect that the off-chain like NASDAQ price actually pulls closer to that, or people are just going to continue to see that it's an arb. We don't have the power to actually pull this thing, and that like anytime you see deviation, it's immediately buy and sell, or like to try to like short the thing because it's going to get pulled down once markets open again. If someone's going to arb that. So yeah, I'm curious to see how that normalizes as it continues to roll out.
Okay. Look, we'll circle back to this conversation inevitably. We've kind of put our position out there for a bit and how we think at least some of it is going to go. The rest we'll need to see. We will come back to it as necessary. We do want to get into the show today though, because in a short period of time, in about 20 minutes, we will have Enzo from GTE on the show. Very much looking forward to that conversation about building the fastest decentralized trading platform on MegaETH. So curious to have that conversation, but let's get to the price action as usual to get you up to speed with it. What is going on in the market in the last 24 hours? Saw a bunch of doomerism. Doesn't seem that bad, to be honest. It felt like, when you read market sentiment on Twitter, it felt like maybe the price would be down. Bitcoin is at $107,000. ETH is at 2.4K. XRP is flat. Solana is flat at $149. Hyperliquid is down 1% to 38. Sui is up a couple of percent to $2, almost 80. Getting into the meme coin side of things, Doge is flat at 16 cents. Trump is flat. SPX is up a couple of percent. Bonk is up 3%. Filecoin's actually down 4%. Pengu been on a bit of a run. Let me just make sure this is updated. Yeah, it is. It's that's up a couple of percent too. This needs to upload. One of the bigger movers on the meme coin side of things is the Useless. Useless coin is looking far from useless. I think it's gone past 200 mil now, which is really quite something. Obviously, this is the one that's getting pushed by Bonk Guy. Bonk Guy's new favorite coin was no more than like 30, 40 mil not long ago. So that is the one that's really, really moving.
The impressive thing about Useless is it had dumped to 170 mil and basically recovered in a massive candle going back to 230, and it's like at 240 now. It's still up 80% over the week. Definitely the performer of the week, and with a pretty strong recovery here.
For sure.
Is it literally just like LOL is useless, therefore
Yes.
buy it?
Yes.
I hate it.
I offered no
Carry on.
further explanation because it did not require one. You know, maybe, yes, it is useless, parenthesis, Bonk Guy's pushing it, close parenthesis. Like, that's it.
Yeah, I hate it. Okay. All I see is like, okay, the dude's got motion and it's unoriginal. So next.
Indeed. Okay, so that's what's going on the meme coin side of things. Getting into the headlines themselves. US Senate narrowly passes Trump's big beautiful bill. Legendary's gonna just talk about that in a sec. Solana trading app Axiom is briefly overtaken Hyperliquid on daily volume. We'll touch on that revenue conversation in a moment. And then Figma IPO documents reveal $70 million of Bitcoin, first major company that has kind of shown a big amount of Bitcoin on the balance sheet. I don't know if we'll have to talk about that as a headline independently. It's kind of self-explanatory, although maybe reflecting on the significance of a naturally big company might be helpful. Ledge, anything we need to know on the NFT side today?
I'll keep it short, one sentence only. Interesting trend to observe. Bored Apes continue to dump, down 6% over the week, 10.5 ETH floor for them. Pudgy Penguins are moving up, obviously not as aggressively as the Pengu token. Pengu token up 50% over the week. Pudgy Penguins up 3.6%, 9.8 ETH floor. So we're getting close to a situation, if this trend continues, where Penguins could once more flip apes.
Interesting. That is interesting. I wonder whether, okay, so Pengu's doing quite well. I wonder whether it's got anything to do with abstract potential token. I would bet that's quite far out though. Like, it's still only the start of July. So, okay, well, that's interesting to note, that gap closing. In the rest of the roundup, SEC announced it's preparing guidelines as a listing standard for crypto ETFs. That's probably quite helpful to have some more proper rules coming from the SEC rather than them fighting us all the time. Deutsche Bank plans to launch crypto custody service as early as 2026, according to Bloomberg. That seems pretty routine now for banks. DFDV announced a $100 million private convertible note offering with plans to accumulate more SOL. Obviously, they've been they're a SOL treasury company, so they're focusing on Solana. This was interesting. Connecticut governor signs into law a Bitcoin reserve ban to prevent the state from buying or investing in digital assets. And the Arizona governor vetoes the bill seeking to create a reserve fund from seized crypto. So that's quite specific. It's just about what you do with funds that are seized specifically. So a little bit of negativity there for coming out of some of the states as it relates to crypto. Some other bits of news. Azuki announces Anime Studio, which has some pretty big names part of their partnership with them. Circle announced Circle Gateway, which is a developer service that enables unified USDC balance for instant cross-chain liquidity. Reminds me a little bit of USDT Zero, which kind of allows USDT to go all over the place. And then SRM Entertainment, is the largest publicly traded holder of Tron, buys $100 million of Tron and stakes it all. So a lot of various treasury companies kind of doing what they are mandated to do. That's the roundup, guys. I think unless there's anything that's super important to you, we've only got 15 minutes before we have Enzo on from GTE, which we're looking forward to have that conversation. So maybe, Ledge, if you want to go either call out something as you go into just a bit of a reflection on the big, beautiful bill, where we are on that and what we need to know.
Yeah, let's move into the big beautiful bill, which, as you said, narrowly passed in the Senate, 887 pages long, and with a massive priority on making the tax cuts permanent, which have been introduced in Trump's last administration. Just to give some numbers on that, to give an idea where money will go to and how much that will cost, the bill would provide roughly $350 billion also for Trump's border and national security agenda. That is including 46 bill for the US-Mexico border. There's many more tax items obviously in there, which will total at we don't have the time to get into all the details, but will total at $4.5 trillion in tax cuts. And that has caused this massive discussion all over the media and in the timeline. If the US is really in a place where it can afford to do tax cuts as high as that, and how that will affect the annual deficit, how that will affect the entire growth strategy of the states, because that money obviously has to come from some place or it has to be cut in other places. And that also led to this very interesting situation where Elon again posted that there is a need for a third party, and he wants to basically found and incorporate that third party,
America Party,
the America Party, because he had this chart that basically shows Democrats and Republicans are all the same. That is going up no matter what party the president is from. And there is a polymarket bet for that. Obviously, there is. Let's bring it up on screen. Will Elon Musk create a new political party by July 4th? 7% chance. July 31st, 32% chance. Or December 31st, 45% chance. And that is a $1.7 million market now to bet on. And it looks like a 50-50 situation, at least for the end of the year, if we'll see that happen or not.
I mean, that'd be crazy. Absolutely crazy. It was an interesting chart, Ledge. If you're able to find that whilst I go to Funky, who wants to come in on this. Funk, what is your view here on the big, beautiful bill? What are the implications for crypto and other risk assets? We've kind of spoken about it before, but any specific take on this kind of specific passing of the bill?
man down.
I cannot hear you, Funky.
I cannot hear you, Funky. Okay.
We can hear our feedback though.
Hear our feedback though. Dang.
Yeah, Funk, that's not working. You got to get this audio set up. It sounded a little bit like Batman yesterday. Now you're doing a disappearance trick. Okay, yeah, you're gonna have to have a play around and see.
How about now?
No.
Basically.
Yeah, we'll have to fix it later, man. Or jump on Spaces audio only, maybe. We're just looking at the chart on the screen, which is showing the kind of the debt spiral, I guess, which is just absolutely colossal when you look at it like that. One thing I wanted to add to this, Ledge, is this. I mean, Balaji is often, I don't know, I guess he's been quite alarmist for quite some time, right? People do think that he's been right on a bunch. Maybe he's a little bit alarmist on this, or maybe he's right. Just for people's context, so you know what he's saying. He's just gone as far as to say the US is broke, full stop. In this tweet, which also has a graph of the national debt, he said the real debt is 175 trillion plus. Elon Musk is 100% correct on the numbers, but the difficult step is the logical conclusion. There is no fix, is his opinion. It is a write-off, a national bankruptcy, and the default will be in the form of money printing. So look, that's kind of the conclusion we are often coming to. And it feels like we are heading in that direction. However, question for the boys, and Funky maybe answering this specific question if you're back with us, is if that's the case, and this news is kind of being telegraphed and everyone's so confident, why are prices not reacting that well? I've seen some quite prominent smart traders asking that question, like, look, they're pretty much telling you they're going to inflate this stuff away, but the price is not reacting yet, when usually it has done when Trump has telegraphed things. When he says stuff, when he wants to do tariffs, they tank. When he tells people to buy Tesla, then goes up again. They're kind of telling people what to do, and it's not really reacting. So, Funky, any thoughts on that? What might be happening there?
Hopefully you guys can hear me. I'm back to the AirPods. They're working.
Yes,
There
we
he
got
goes.
you.
Okay, so just the frame that I wanted to bring up with just the big beautiful bill in general is in the whole addiction to spending, to something I said before the election, that both parties are going to do. They're going to spend money on whatever priorities they have. But what was interesting was Summer Mersinger, who is the CEO of Blockchain Association. She was saying that Trump was actually trying to put pressure on Crapo from Idaho to get that amendment for the tax stuff in. It didn't go through. But the one thing I want to clarify is I think people are getting their hopes up a little too early, because if you weren't paying attention, if you're not in the States, this really came down to the wire from even passing in the Senate. You know, crypto Twitter just like, oh yeah, they passed a big beautiful bill, all the money's coming, here we go. That's not the case. Okay, so what happened was JD Vance, who is the vice president, had to come in and issue the tie-breaking vote. This was how contentious it was, even in the Senate among Republicans. Lisa Murkowski from Alaska, she basically had to like do some finagling to get some extra stuff for Alaska. So she voted. It was hugely controversial. And now it's got to go to the House. And the House does not have some massive majority of Republicans that's just going to instantly push through this legislation. So this is still something that I think people are celebrating a little too early when it comes to the big beautiful bill, and it has another uphill battle in the House. So I just wanted to like share that information today, because I felt like people are just like cheering this on, like, oh yeah, global macro liquidity, and they're going to cut rates and they're going to spend all this money. It is not out of the woods yet. Until it passes in the House and gets to Trump's desk, this is not across the finish line.
Yeah, that's a really important point to point out, is going back to the House now. It was a 50-50. The vice president was required to tip it over. I'm feeling, I mean, my instinct is that it will likely go through, just because, I mean, I was reading the article, Funky, and they kind of leaned on some people who were still negative, who were publicly negative about it after they voted, even though they voted for it. Like, it obviously shows like the political wranglings that can take place. I think the right people will just get leaned on to get this through. That seems to be what happens at the moment. But yeah, you're right to point that out. So we'll keep an eye on it. Question still persists though, Legendary. Like, why? Maybe this is the final question on this. If this is seemingly so obvious to people, if people are so convinced that spending goes up, if people are so convinced that rates will come down, that's the separate part of the equation that we've been speaking about a lot. Like, it's been a few days now that you know, even though things have become slightly more peaceful around the world, but I mean, you know, things aren't perfect, right? But compared to how the violence was escalating some time ago, that kind of conversation has become slightly more peaceful. So why are we not seeing any kind of moves here, do you think?
I don't know if this is the right picture, honestly, because S&P 500 is essentially at all-time high. It did pass all-time high a couple of days ago. That is as bullish as it gets. We are at all-time high. Yes, BTC is not at 110, it's at 108. Yes, ETH is not at 5K.
Why is it not at 112 though?
The bigger relevant market, the stock market, which is so much bigger, is at all-time high in the States.
True.
That is bullish enough, I guess.
Okay. What about the question of DXY getting weaker? People wondering whether these flows will go to the stock market in general as people try to get out of the dollar's getting weaker. And therefore, Bitcoin and gold is supposed to be the thing that improves against the stock market. No, that would be the argument.
If Bitcoin outperforms the stock market, yes, but basically then the question becomes, do you want to hold dollars or do you want to have your dollars allocated? And even if the probably right way to look at this is then, if you have your dollars in the stock market and the stock market does well, your purchasing power also goes up if that basically is outperforming inflation, because from a domestic perspective, the decline of the dollar doesn't really matter to you from an American perspective, at least.
Okay, if you're an American asset holder.
Yeah.
Okay. That's the question I just wanted to pose for now. It's definitely something I'm going to be thinking about as part of the general conversation we've had, which is, okay, stocks. What's this plan for stocks? Because I think it's never made more sense as a crypto person to own some crypto stocks And maybe as part of the rest of this conversation now, it's becoming obvious that the stock market is something to have, if certainly not no exposure to. So yeah, we'll keep thinking about that and bring more insight on it as we have it. Conscious of the time today, we've got Enzo from GTE joining us in just a little bit. Very happy to have that conversation on GTE and how they're building out on MegaETH shortly. Before we get there, the final headline today, Bread, was Solana trading app Axiom briefly overtaking Hyperliquid on daily volume. Curious for your take here, what's happening? And then maybe just a reflection on revenue. I know you look at these numbers all the time. And so thinking through like the significance of revenue and how those apps that are making revenue are performing.
Yeah, I was just talking to people on the timeline about revenue generally. So this one specifically is just people were calling out Axiom, which is a trading app that spans both Solana and Hyperliquid, flipping Hyperliquid in terms of fees in the 24-hour. Yeah, the thing to note with Axiom is like, yes, they do generate a lot of fees, but they also give a rebate back. So they're not actually capturing 100% of the fees that they are generating, because a lot of that goes back to their users in the form of rebates. So it's not one-to-one with Hype, which every dollar that is generated by Hype is claimed by Hype, and 97% of that dollar is used to buy Hype. So it's good. It's notable. It's a little bit artificial from Axiom, and I don't know why that it's necessarily noteworthy or why everyone jumped on it. Maybe just because Hype has like been the king for so long that it's exciting whenever anything does it. I think what we're broadly going to see or continue to see is that I know it's been laughed at as a meta, but like with the revenue meta, you're just going to continue to see these things that actually generate fees be priced differently. And like Axiom doesn't have a token that you can actually trade, but this broadly extends to just like apps versus chains broadly. Whereas like chains themselves, I did a little tweet yesterday that was actually quote tweeting a previous conversation that we had out here on the Modern Market. Was just like, I still think we may have seen the forever top on a lot of these L1 assets, because as these things move to the background and as apps come forward as the thing that people want and or use and or pay fees for, which is like the pump funds of the world, which are generating damn near $1 billion in fees, the Hyperliquid, which has a perps market that was generating damn near $1 billion in fees a year, that they are capturing that money, that vastly outperforms the infrastructure, which is the Ethereums, the Bases, the Arbitrums, the Bitcoins, the Solanas of the world. Solana's doing pretty good. Like if you try to tally up all of the fees that are generated on top of it, but the direct things that go to token holders of Solana, is that margin is only getting smaller. So if this is going to continue to be the thing that happens, you're probably going to see the market wisen up to it and say, look, we want the thing that generates the fees and keeps the fees, and the fees go to the actual token. And that is going to continue to trend towards applications, because applications will get smarter. They will get better at capturing their own fees, whether it's on chain by doing like some application specific sequencing, which means they don't give as much of it up to like the validators or to the bundlers or to the whatevers of the ecosystem, or any other whatever means that they have. If they just like they go and build an app chain similar to like Hyperliquid, which they just totally isolate themselves from other environments. So this is just the trend we're going to continue to see. And chains can only win by having incredible volume, which is what Solana is trying to do. It's very tough for an Ethereum. It's what MegaETH will be trying to do. Enzo's here now, so like we'll be able to talk a little bit about what that will look like. But broadly, it's just like, this is where the market's going. People want applications, and applications are going to seek out the best environments to actually be able to have the best experience, to provide the best experience, the best execution, the best UX, the cleanest, or most responsive thing, because they don't really give a shit about the underlying. And like, that's just what the world is going to do. They're going to generate the fees, and that's where the value is going to accrue. It makes me think with pumps raise coming, right? If you're doing a $1 bill raise at $4 bill, right? And you look at like Avalanche, which is generating like $37 a week in fees. Like if we're going to say revenue meta is a thing, then pump is vastly undervalued, right? If we're going to give these like L1 growth multiples to these applications, $4 bill as a valuation on like 750 mil in revenue generated in a year, that's insane. That's like what, 6 to 8 multiple, something like that. Whereas you're giving these L1 chains anywhere between like 40 and 1200 multiples on like what they're generating versus what their valuation's at. So yeah, we'll continue to see the trend. Enzo will actually be able to talk a little bit about it too.
Perfect segue. I think that's all really, really helpful. I think that conversation is only going to accelerate, particularly as you guys come to market, actually, like as MegaETH coming to market, when you've been so vocal and explicit about that focus that you guys have had. I think people will be looking at those numbers and those comparisons a lot. So that'll be really interesting to note. But as you said, Enzo is with us now. Delighted to welcome Enzo to the stage with us, founder of GTE, Mega Mafia enthusiast, building what we hope will be one of the fastest decentralized trading platforms available to us on the internet. Enzo, welcome to the show. Glad you're with us.
Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
Very excited to have you with us. Following on, like just straight away, Brad set us up beautifully there. Completely unplanned to get into the MegaETH slash GTE conversation. But before we get into the main stuff about yourself and GTE, like, what's your view on this kind of fat app thesis, the idea that a lot of the value is going to start to accrue to apps versus chains, which have been historically kind of overvalued and may continue to be, but that's going to kind of get disrupted by people really focusing on the app layer now?
Yeah, it's a interesting conversation, like to be an app, and it's a good time to be an app builder, but I still think it's also a good time to be a chain builder as well, right? Ultimately, the market is basically saying, I don't like chains that are like 1 to 2x better than what has existed before, right? So let's say I have like a EVM or an ETH killer. If it's not, 10, 20 times better like Solana was, then there's no actual like breakthrough for those chains and the applications that get made on them to actually meaningfully differentiate. So no premium gets attached to both the app and the actual chain that exists, right? And I would actually say I'm a bit more optimistic than Brad in the relationship that apps and chains can have, which is ultimately, right? Like, so if we take this underlying opinion or thesis and we say, hey, the apps that stand out that can accrue this value must exist on a state layer or a chain that's fundamentally 10 times better than the incumbent, then both the app and the chain can do really well together. I think Hyperliquid is an outlier and an anomaly in which they were able to both innovate on the chain underlying and the app. But I still think that there can exist a symbiotic relationship between both state layer and app, specifically if the app embeds the state layer's kind of token within the application itself, right? When we look at Pump and the value being leaked to Pump to Solana, I would honestly probably say like they're very happy that that happened, and the Solana team is very happy that Pump exists. And they would rather have Pump exist than Pump not exist. And I would think for any sort of application, you would feel the same, right? Or else it's just going to be an arms race in which everybody's copying each other. And that leads to kind of like negative outcomes and negative game theory for everybody.
Yeah, I see what you mean there. Go on, Brad.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think the thing that Enzo is starting to creep towards there, I totally agree. Solana's extremely happy that Pump is there, and I think there's a little bit of dissection of different properties that the chains can actually offer that I think Hyperliquid is going to have some trouble with, right? Because Hyperliquid has a very valuable thing, which is the perps side of it, the hypercore element, but it lacks, because of that's all compartmentalized into hypercore, it lacks a lot of composability, right? So like there is no opportunity for me to come over there and to build something that can be quickly interoperable, because like they try to do this thing where like, oh, you have hyper EVM, but it's still kind of a bridge between the two things, so it might as well be two separate chains. And like, oh, you can build tools, but like it's still only 7 TPS, so like you will never be able to build a Hyperliquid style app on Hyperliquid because you're stuck in hyper EVM. Whereas on the Solana world, right, you can build Pump, and Pump is insanely valuable, and there is some value leakage. And the composability element that the chain offers by having a single state layer is valuable for Jupiter. It's valuable for Jito. So like all of those other things can be built side by side and be immensely valuable. Now there is like, because it's an L1, there is a lot of headwinds there, because you can get fucking obliterated, frankly, by the MEV pipeline, by the things building the actual blocks. Whereas like what Enzo is going to be building, right? Like he's building a Hyperliquid plus, and he's doing it in a composable environment. So that means Legendary or BCheck or myself can come into that environment and build up something right alongside of it. and get the composability that you would want to have in a Hyperliquid environment, but the performance plus of a single state environment that is just like highly performant without getting bastardized by the MEV, because you have some control over with the sequencers, right? So I think that's what like Enzo's starting to creep towards there, is you have this best of all worlds situation where you can build these hyper performant, really slick UX experiences and generate a shit ton of value because it's a great user experience and you get excellent execution, the best execution, and then you also get the composability. Like it's amazing.
Yeah, I would echo that. I would also say it's really important for like front ends and applications to distribute and pair tokens accordingly, right? Like when you think about the premium attached to like Hyper EVM, it's because they have this premium that every base pair and the AMM and the launchpad and things that exist within that state layer will be denominated in Hype, right? And it's very important for people to understand the mimetic powers of the chain, and what like pump even denominating, like buying, a pump coin with Solana, and like what that did for people's understanding of the chain, right? I actually come from the camp like applications should focus on revenue and chain should focus on memes. And what do I mean by that, right? Like the biggest chain by far is Bitcoin, right? And if you look at like what a lot of these like venture funds are saying right now, they're basically admitting like, hey, like it's really hard for us to beat Bitcoin, right? And they tell all their LPs, like, hey, I'm going to raise money to like privately deploy into chains and applications to beat the return of Bitcoin. And what we see right now, because of Saylor and MicroStrategy and these like public acquisition vehicles, is like every like crypto venture fund is saying like, hey, like what we're going to do is we're going to take our altcoin and we're going to launch like a pipe deal so that we can just get new bidders for this token, right? But the honest truth is nobody wants these tokens. So just because you can list it on like a public acquisition vehicle, like it doesn't actually change like the like underlying fact that like it is just a worse token and subsequently like a worse meme than Bitcoin, right? But if you have like a state layer and a chain that really unlocks the next level of applications, the applications can survive and thrive because they make meaningful revenue. Then the application is therefore incentivized to distribute the mimetic power of the token and the underlying chain as much as possible, especially if they have a really good relationship with the people that are building kind of like the state layer, right? It takes a certain set of builder to build a really solid application than it does to build like a chain, right? And we're very like particular, like, hey, like GT, like we really want to differentiate and focus on the product and the end user, and all of our hires and all of our announcements and all of our kind of team composition is around that, right? And we think we have a very symbiotic relationship with the chain that we work on, because they say, hey, we want applications to live here, feel comfortable here, and essentially not get nationalized, right? And if you have that positive relationship, there's enough incentive for everybody to play different games, right?
Sure.
My game is to not go to ETHCC and have a bunch of conference sponsorships and a bunch of booths trying to tell 100 people, hey, you should use GT and by proxy MegaETH. My game is to go on Twitter and say, hey, if you trade here, you're going to make money. And it's going to be the cheapest and fastest decentralized exchange to play here. And so because I have conflicting incentives as an app builder to also not build the chain, because I don't want to play the games of finding builders, sourcing builders, developing them, incubating them, I'm also incentivized to work very closely with the underlying state layer to make sure that there's that mimetic lindiness. And that's like a very important distinction that I think most people overlook, right? Which is that Pump won and they should be rewarded for winning, but it doesn't have to come at the detriment or expense of the underlying chain. Just because some value gets leaked doesn't mean the Solana guys are not billionaires.
Sure.
Right? And like, that's a very important distinction for people to make, right? And like Axiom is another example of this too, right? Like everybody wins when more users come on chain, right? What we're seeing is high performance, low latency blockchains enabling more users to come on concurrently. Where do you think this is going to trend when MegaETH and GTE go live? We'll be able to support hundreds of thousands of people concurrently using the chain at any time. If MegaETH and GT's tokens are both on that exchange, they both will do very well, right? Just based off the exposure that a user will be able to get and the games they'll be able to play. I think that's a very important caveat within this tension in this relationship, right? But on legacy L1s, things like Ethereum and perhaps Uniswap, like you look at Unichain and it's not good enough for both parties, right? Like Uniswap on the L1 is not good enough anymore. And Unichain was not good enough because it didn't do any breakthroughs. And look what happens. All the liquidity there is mercenary. Nobody actually wants to stay there. Nobody actually wants to trade there because the applications are not good. It's just Uniswap with a different state layer. And look, nothing really happened, right? You must have both a new chain and a new app to actually differentiate and break through. And I'm very strongly opinionated on that.
Yeah, I think what you guys maybe in combination said about the requirement to be markedly different to the previous best version. So, okay, Solana was a step change above ETH. The performance was better, and now you need to beat that in order to make a meaningful difference. Let's talk about the competition though, and maybe actually just give people a sense of like what you guys are doing, what the core vision is. Your tagline is trade anything, anywhere, anytime. And, you know, we've kind of touched on Hyperliquid quite naturally. That has made some people position you as a Hyperliquid killer, or there's certainly one of your competitors, with some comparisons maybe to Binance too, and that whole conversation. How do you see what GTE is bringing to the market, and how are you positioning yourselves?
Yeah, it's a great question. Like we often get like Hyperliquid comparisons and Binance comparisons and like, you know, NASDAQ, decentralized NASDAQ, etc. I had a tweet about this where we talked about like these comparisons are nice, they're useful in the early stages for people to like, people love analogies, right? Oh, it's Hyperliquid but faster, Hyperliquid with one validator, right? But Hyperliquid plus, even as like Brad said, but like ultimately our intention is to build GTE, and GTE stands for Global Token Exchange, right? I think if you look at what the market just responded to in the past week, which is these tokenized stocks, these real world assets, right? We see this convergence of systems starting to happen, both in traditional finance and the crypto kind of rails and blockchain layers. And the reason we named it Global Token Exchange, the reason we exist on MegaETH, and the reason we've built all the infrastructure on chain is we have this fundamental belief that it's inevitable that everything that can get tokenized will get tokenized. And when that happens, you want to create a marketplace that the most sophisticated liquidity providers can provide liquidity for people that want to trade anything, anywhere, at any time, right? I'll give you an example of this using real world assets like stocks, right? In which we see these kind of X shares or these Robinhood shares, right? And the plan is to eventually get them trading 24/7 on the Robinhood's Arbitrum chain, right? Arbitrum's block time, I think, is around like 200 milliseconds. And so if you take any sophisticated like HFT, that 200 milliseconds is like the difference between, you know, a round trip around the world from like Tokyo to America and back, right? That is like a whole world for them to kind of have different pricing information and provide liquidity for, right? So we took the fundamental belief like, hey, we don't want to be the asset issuer here. All we want to do is we want to make the environment for people to trade whatever asset they want to trade 24/7. Our belief is that if it's a stock, if it's a commodity, if it's crypto, it will always naturally flow to the fastest execution environment. That execution environment is MegaETH, and GT is the marketplace on top of it. So when we say trade anything, anywhere, anytime, we say, hey, we've built the foundation for everybody else to start to put things into the form of a token and build a global token exchange.
And is this like the... Go ahead, Brad.
Yeah, I was just saying, like, just to double click on something that he referred to there. So the block times of Arbitrum, like, it's just the easiest way for people to understand like the impact of this on trading and on like market makers, whatever, is that both the block time and the latency can be interpreted as drift from the actual price of a thing. So it's all an arbitration opportunity, right? So the block time is, remember, these things are just like stamps of like state changes. Like, this is the world, this is the world, this is the world, right? And as you guys know, the price of something never stops updating, right? So if you have the snapshot of like, this is the state of the world being further away from the actual real-time price. So whether if it's 12 seconds on Ethereum mainnet, that's 12 seconds of arbitration opportunity of drift from the actual on-chain price from the realized off-chain price, like what's happening on sexes, what's happening on the NASDAQ, whatever, right? So you want to, as a performance chain, to basically shrink these things to zero, because like anytime you have either latency between the user and the thing building the blocks and the time it takes for the thing to actually build the next block, all of that is drift from real like the actual off-chain price, and lessens the likelihood that you can actually have price discovery on chain. Because until you actually have this thing being the leader, like with liquidity, with action, with like the market makers being co-located, so that like the actual time between the person making the request, the order, the cancel, the whatever, is measured in single milliseconds, and then the actual chain itself updating the price of the world in single milliseconds, like that total round trip time is now measured in 5, 10, 6, whatever milliseconds, as opposed to Arbitrum, which is 200 milliseconds, Base, which is 2 seconds, Ethereum mainnet, which is 12 seconds, right? Like all of that is drift from real price, the real-time price, like the actual price. And us as a team are trying to shrink that stuff down to zero. Enzo's doing it specifically, talking to market makers to make sure that they're co-located next to our sequencer, our block builder, so that that time, like the distance between them to actually place the order and it to get on chain and then realized into the chain state, is measured in single milliseconds, which means now it's competitive with a Binance. Now it's competitive with the NASDAQ. Now it's competitive with actual off-chain stuff, but it's still on-chain. And that price exposure is opened up to the entire network. So like, you want to shrink that arbitration opportunity to zero, because otherwise it's just an opportunity for everyday users to get brutalized by people that are more sophisticated than them. Sorry, Ledge. I just wanted to expand on that.
Yeah, all good. And actually super helpful, because the question that I have is building on this, because Enzo, you mentioned essentially 3 things. You mentioned being the best way to trade because there's sufficient liquidity, because it's cheap to trade. You mentioned being able to trade basically anything there. And obviously Brett has expanded massively on the concept of the fastest execution to make trading the best, because then you can't be screwed over if someone else is seizing an arbitrage opportunity. Out of these 3 things, so like liquidity, execution speed, and basically the listing pool or the amount of listings, what would you say when it comes to like measuring success is the most important component, or is it really the equal interplay of those 3?
Yeah, I think it's like a combination of everything. To make efficient markets, you need to have both liquidity providers and also people that want to buy those assets, so to take the other side of it, right? And in like kind of the trading world, we call that retail flow, right? Where it's like the person using Robinhood or the person using GTE. And ultimately what that person cares about is very different than what the market maker cares about, right? That person cares, hey, am I going to have a UI that's intuitive? Am I going to know that the price that I see on the screen is very close to the price that I'm going to execute my trade at? Am I going to have a wide, diverse range and set of tickers to trade and buy and purchase? And I'm going to enjoy this experience, right? So a lot of that gets unlocked when you have a state layer that can update faster than like the human eye can blink. And that's what you get with MegaETH. And you can see that reflected on the GTE product, right? Where a lot of people say it reminds them of a centralized exchange. And the reason for that is because the underlying is the same kind of latency as a centralized exchange. And so you can therefore replicate a lot of the kind of game conditions that centralized exchanges can introduce for that retail trader, that makes it a really fun and kind of like fast experience for them that they love trading on, and they know that they're going to get the best price. And on the flip side of that, right, the market maker cares about something completely different, right? They care about speed to the utmost degree, to the point where they're willing to go and do things like have microwave towers between Singapore and Tokyo, communicating price information between Binance and Bybit, right? And we want to play onto that too, if that makes sense, where we want to say, hey, like, not only is the retail person going to love trading here because you're going to be here providing liquidity, but you're also going to love trading here because we're going to give you the exact same microstructure and game conditions that you're used to. When you think about other chains, including, Hyperliquid as an example, right? Like, it has this notion of consensus, and this consensus acts as like a generalized speed bump, right? Where you're really protecting a lot of kind of makers and people that would provide liquidity on the maker side, right? But the problem is that some of the most sophisticated liquidity providers in the space, think like the top providers on Binance or CME or NASDAQ, they're both really good makers and really good takers. So if you introduce consensus into the critical path, in which you say, okay, this block is going to execute every 200 milliseconds, we'll have a notion of a priority fee. You need to start doing things like putting cancels at the top of the block just to protect makers from a more sophisticated party coming in and, you know, taking from you, right? The MEV kind of dark forest and such. But the problem is you lose composability when that happens, if there's enough of a latency time for someone to arbitrage you effectively. When you have a real-time blockchain, right, that updates in 1 to 5 milliseconds, that edge that you have to protect against for people that are kind of playing those MEV games becomes greatly reduced, because the actual odds and likelihood that somebody can take, you know, pricing data from another exchange front run and arbitrage you out is very, very like minimally reduced because of the fact that chain is executing as fast as a centralized exchange. It's not impossible, and that's actually what you want to provide as a market microstructure. We fundamentally believe that if you prioritize both takers and makers in a fair game, that's the only way that you could actually potentially flip centralized exchange volume. Because if you protect makers with this speed bumper consensus, then you'll be able to essentially like say, hey, you know, the best liquidity providers will never be able to bring a majority of their flow here, right? And that's not actually a good thing for retail traders, right? Like that's going to reduce the slippage, or that's going to increase the slippage that you'll have. It's going to reduce the amount of volume that you'll see, right? And it's going to reduce the liquidity flywheel overall on the exchange. And so we're very particular when we say like, hey, like GT will also be the most fair place to trade for all sorts of liquidity providers.
Interesting. Okay, that's super helpful to get a kind of general sense of how you envision the product working for all of those various stakeholders, because I think that's going to be super interesting for the audience. Moving into, I'm conscious of time, so we just want to go maybe a couple of questions on the raise and some thoughts on valuations and stuff. Then if there's anything we've missed, we're happy for you to share any extra information. But when we originally announced this last week, you announced, I think it was on Monday, that you raised $50 million Series A from Paradigm. So congratulations on that. Following on from a $10 million raise across, I think, 3 rounds in January, including a $2.5 million community round on Echo. Just thinking about this from the funding side for a moment, because we have a lot of investors and funds who watch in too. How are you feeling with the raise? How are you feeling that you're placed? How was that whole process for you? How have you thought about it?
Yeah, the first, thanks. I appreciate it. The raise announcement was great, right? Like we got, I think, over 1 million impressions in aggregate, which is awesome for like an exchange. And, you know, like we said, right, like distribution is really important. I think there's a lot of people that really fundamentally believe in a lot of what we preach, right? Which is the ability to kind of like trade anything, anywhere, anytime, right? And first is like, we really like working kind of with our investors across the board, our past investors, our new investor in the form of Paradigm. And we think they've already been like a really big strategic help. And ultimately we also kind of think like this capital will let us go and build and compete at the highest level alongside like Brett and the MegaETH team. And we're excited to be able to basically enter the arena and say like, hey, like we haven't accomplished anything yet. And we still feel like it's day 0, but now we know, like, you know, maybe as of yesterday or last week, one more person cares about this mission and they care about it very deeply. And that was really the fundamental kind of reason why we wanted to partner up with this investor here and also just kind of our investors in the past, is they fundamentally believed in a lot of the ethos and what we're saying of creating more fair and equitable markets kind of around the world.
Indeed. One note on the community side of things. One thing that MegaETH have become known for themselves is the idea of like trying to include the community as much as possible. I think you did one community round as well. What's your kind of thesis on that? Will there be more
They're in the
opportunities?
green, baby. They're already marked up.
Is it done for now? Any thoughts there?
Yeah, no. So it's never done, right? Like what's beautiful about crypto is like anybody can be an investor, right? And so what was very important for us, and I think you can see in the reception of GT and MegaETH, is there's this game, right, that exists within the small subset, very, very small subset of like crypto participants, which is like the VC game, right? And like what people are upset about is not that VCs exist, right? VCs are no different from somebody that goes onto Binance and buys a token, right? They're just buying a token in a private room. They're buying a token at ETHCC. They're buying a token at, token 2049, right? And that upsets the person that uses the application, right? It's not that they exist. It's that they exist within a room and they gatekeep it from other people. And I think if you're looking strategically at what is probably the future and likelihood that, VCs are going to die, it's zero, right? VCs have existed for hundreds of years, thousands of years, right? People that want other people to succeed. That's not a bad thing. But when you think about what kind of we've done and why the reception has been so positive, it's that we used crypto as a rail to allow anybody to become a VC. And that's the important distinction here. It's not that, we have no VCs, so we're the best, or we have only the best VCs, so we're the best. It's that everybody can choose the token that they want to support and therefore like work with, right? And we were lucky enough to have 1,000 kind of like individual people at the seed round say, hey, I like what GT is doing a lot, and I want to invest into this token and into this kind of community and this protocol as well. And so we did the work of delivering the product, the test net, and the rest of it. And what we were able to get was their belief and their support from every iteration of the product to now. And so when you do kind of like a sequential logical steps here, you're able to have people really buy into the mission. And they think about the investors second because they already are an investor. And so if a project has the foundations of doing the right thing from the very beginning, you're starting to see the reward for it, right? Where I don't think that anybody calls us a VC project or anybody says, this token is owned by people that are just going to dump on me. It's really like, hey, these projects made it very apparent to the market. They want their support and most importantly, their capital too. And they will work hard for them. They will work as hard for them as they work for any VC that has a good brand and a good logo. And that was very important for me, right? Is that, hey, I'm nothing without these people that support us, right? And so I'm nothing without the people that use the product. I'm nothing without the people that engage with the tweets. What's the best way that I can show them my support? I can give them access at an early stage. If they choose to believe in me like I believe in them, I will be able to reward them. We did the echo round in January. We put our heads down. 4 or 5 months later, they got a 3x, right? It's not, anything like that they couldn't have beat on the liquid market, but these things compound. If our token 10x's again, they're in the money and they're in the green big. We'd be the first project alongside Mega to really particularly emphasize that, maybe along the likes of Bitcoin or Ethereum early believers back in the day. And here's this interesting shift that you'll see where it's when these chains can support scale and mass concurrent usage like Echo can, then you'll be able to get more capital allocators in a time of fundraising and crowdfunding. You'll be able to reset the game that's being played entirely. And we're very particular, we always put community first. We've put community first in the past. We're going to continue to put community first. And I think the fundraise was a good demonstration and representation of that belief.
Yeah, it was great to see some of the ethos that we tried to espouse with our own echo raise, followed by Enzo and team, and then to see some early success with that. Obviously we haven't done any raises to just show that they can be fruitful going this path. And as you've seen with other ecosystems, typically it's a top-down thing where it's you establish the culture, you establish the ethos, and through that you kind of hope that it continues to get emulated throughout the ecosystem. And we've encouraged teams to do the same route. We think it is hugely valuable to let people get in on this stuff, but it's also, there's a little bit of market awareness that needs to happen. A lot of people that are doing this stuff don't realize that it's not easy. Not everything's going to be a W, you have terms associated to it. It's not immediately liquid, all of that stuff. So it goes both ways, but seeing success cases like what Enzo just called out is amazing. And the fact that it came after only a few months is even better. And then, yeah, hopefully we continue to create opportunities like this within the ecosystem. If we're all just generating value and then leveraging what the crypto is great for, which is capital formation through stuff like this, like it's better for everyone. We bootstrap a community. Everyone wins ultimately, because now that the people that are incentivized to actually communicate for you, advocate for you, are also getting some upside exposure, which is, what we're all trying to do. And then just one additional point, back on some of the technical stuff. Enzo was referring to a lot of things relative to his competitors. So we talk about like Hyperliquid with consensus. That also applies to Solana or any L1. I think it's just important to call out that, especially in a world where we think everything's going to get commoditized technically, that all of those things are structural, right? Like it's not just like, oh, Solana's going to rip out all of consensus tomorrow to be able to keep up with MegaETH. You literally, they can't do that. So unless Solana is going to pivot to becoming an L2, you cannot do that, right? So same thing with Hyperliquid. Hyperliquid fundamentally disadvantages itself by being a full L1, because you cannot rip out that consensus component, which restricts you by physics to speed of light, like data propagation, right? Like that is always going to be a fundamental bottleneck by these systems, which means someone like an Enzo and a GTE can come in with unique designs, structural microstructure for these large players, right? The liquidity providers, the market makers, and they will always have an advantage because of physics, because of how these chains literally are built. And that will not be given up unless these chains are going to give up basically their like they're going to have to kneel, right, to other chains, or to give up a little bit of their or show fealty to another chain, right, by outsourcing consensus somewhere else, like we did with Ethereum. So I think that's just like something worth pointing out, and it's a reason why I decided to go down this path of joining the MegaETH team, because it's not just like we're going to update our code, like submit a PR and remove consensus. Like it is such a monumental shift that would need to take place for these other competitors to be able to compete, that it's unlikely to ever happen.
Brad, every time you go into this stuff, I get Hyperliquid maxis in my DMs. So I'm going to have to I'll
send them my way. I've been fighting them on time for a while, and like Hyperliquid can be great. It's just that like it's like you need to have these have these things that like because of things, and that, like there's several because of things that I made sure that this construction had before I dove in.
Indeed.
Can I add something there?
Sorry, Enzo, go for it.
Which is like, I think that's why it's very important to like distinctify like GT versus Hyperliquid versus Binance. Like this is a net new product that can exist, right? It's like when you think about the, like what Brett is saying, even on like the app side, right? I'll give you an example of this. There have been 17 million tokens launched on GTA since the testnet started 90 days ago. That is very hard to like build data infrastructure for. And the honest truth is that every system that we built broke, every single one on day one, the RPCs, the indexer, all of the auxiliary infrastructure as well, right? And so like when you compare markets here, tickers, right? Like all of that, right? Like, okay, that's 17 million individual potential tickers, right? And that can be crossed with any other ticker as well to create a market too, right? When you have, these kind of like hyper core, hyper EVM distinctions, then you'll see like, oh, there's really only like 100 to 200 markets on hypercore, right? And like that composability with those level of tokens like doesn't exist because of this distinction in the performance of their state layer on the hyper EVM, just as one example. So when you think of like the product that gets built that represents the totality of GT and MegaETH, it starts to converge at a much different kind of like inflection point on what the user experiences than what they'll experience on Solana, Ethereum, or Hyperliquid and Hyper EVM, right? And so because there are those like differentiations, because that leads to engineering problems, in some capacity, that's a moat within itself, right? We're very, very open with how we build kind of our tech stack and how it works and like all of that, because we say like, hey, like this is really hard. And if you want to try and get into the kind of like arena or the dojo and compete, like you should do it, because I'd be happy, if you figure this out, to just copy you instead, because like it's taken us months, like a year plus to actually get to this point right now. And like, we're going to continue to like innovate and be at the frontier and be at the edge. And specifically because it is hard, is because why we're open. Because we don't think this is just another fork. This is just another chain that has a Uniswap AMM fork or an off-chain perp stacks that settles on chain. This is like a fundamentally radically different approach. And the way that you get there is by doing hard things to make delightful product experiences. And I think both GTE and MegaETH do the hard things to make delightful product experiences.
So definitely seeing some of that unison come out as part of this conversation, which maybe people would not have necessarily appreciated beforehand. And just a note for listeners, like one of the things we do on this show, it's not a full-blown debate. We're not going to be pushing back against all things. Like we want to understand the bull case. That's the whole point. We've already personally, people know we've taken a directional bet on MegaETH as a chain as well. And so we want to fully articulate the bull case, and then people can make their own decisions. That's why we want to have these longer conversations without them being like a full-on hour kind of full-scale debate. So I think that's super, super helpful to hear your perspective, Enzo. Really appreciate you joining us. Just a couple of questions to close. Like, what are you most looking forward to now then? Like, what's your kind of positioning now? Obviously, I think mainnet's still some time away. What are you looking forward to most right here, right now?
The thing I look forward to the most, which is going to sound like a shill, which is just like I really look forward to making the end user happy and like the end customer happy, which is like when people use GT and by proxy, when they use MegaETH, like, are they excited to be there? You know, like there are only certain times and feelings where you use a new app for the first time, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Pump Fund, Hyperliquid, Uniswap, where you're like, wow, I get it, right? And my thing that I'm looking forward to the most is if we're right, and we don't know, the market has to tell us. We work really hard to make sure the market is going to be happy. But if we're right and we're able to elicit that feeling of delight when people use these products, I really look forward to that potential chance that we have to actually make the user happy and feel like we've created something that's net new for the industry and kind of the world at hand.
Sounds great. Brad?
An open offer for people who, if anyone wants to fuck around on GT testnet and they don't have any testnet tokens, just to like see what these delightful experiences might feel like, just the responsiveness, the overall app navigation, let me know. I'll send you over some tokens. You can go fuck around, click some buttons, enjoy it.
Sounds fun. Enzo, I'm just going to share your socials and GTEs for the people who want to follow along. You've got at Enzo_GTE is Enzo's account, and you have at GTE_XYZ for the main account. Before we close out here, Enzo, anything else you'd like to share? Anything that we've missed? Any final message, thought that you'd like to leave us with?
Yeah, the last thing I would like to leave everybody with is if you're thinking about being a builder, I think MegaETH is a really good place to build an application. And like whether it's an exchange, whether it's a DeFi project, whether it's a game, whether it's DePIN, et cetera, I think when you start to see kind of the unlocks that you can get by a 10x better state layer enabling a 10x better app, and then you're able to really start to kind of see a path to victory as a founder. And what I really appreciate the most working like with the MegaETH team is they have an extremely high bar to excellency. They don't tolerate like mediocrity at all, right? They want people to come in, they want people to build the best possible application, and they will help you get there. And they will be both your biggest fan and also your biggest critic. And you need that sort of kind of pressure to make a diamond, right? And if you're that type of person that resonates with, I highly recommend reaching out to Brad or Dabing or Namik or Mir on the MegaETH team and asking and learning more, and they'll be more than happy to help you as they've helped us around the kind of past year.
Perfect. Well, we've got some people in the comments who are already saying they'd love to mess around on GTE with some testnet tokens. So Bread shall provide in
Going through it now.
Enzo, thanks so much for joining us, man. It was a really great conversation. Really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks, guys. Hope you enjoyed the conversation as well. Just a reminder, we do this every single day, Monday to Friday, 7 a.m. Eastern time for 1 hour. Sometimes we do these dial-in style conversations because we want to host the most interesting, best conversations happening on in crypto Twitter as routinely as possible. So We will be back with you again tomorrow as usual, same time, same place on X video, YouTube, and you can catch us on Apple and Spotify if that's where you prefer to catch up on your media. Have a wonderful day. Take care. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.